Hi, and welcome to this webinar on bringing safe products to market. One of the key things we're going to be talking about is PAS 7050, which is on bringing safe products to market. My name is Geraldine Koch, and I will explain a little bit more about myself and the amazing ICW who are hosting this webinar today. We would love it if you could actively participate as much as possible. And we are trying to facilitate that by providing some mentees. You might be familiar with Menti and hopefully they work. And if they don't work, we are risk assessment professionals. So we have the chat function. So please do put any questions or any comments in the chat and we will try and address them throughout this webinar. Your line should be muted, but in case for some reason it isn't, then please ensure that it is. And these webinars are being recorded, which is really useful because you can refer back to them, or maybe you can share them with your colleagues if they weren't able to be here today. If you have any issues or any questions, then feel free to note the email that's there, and I can put it in the chat if you want me to do that, where you can contact ICW with any queries that you have. Okay. So let's get started. And who am I? So who is this lady in front of you? I'm Geraldine Koch, as I've mentioned. I'm a product safety expert. I've been working in product safety for 20 years. I've been running my consultancy now for approximately the last 8 years, and the majority of my career I actually worked at a testing laboratory. I've done lots and lots of training sessions, and I really enjoy training sessions because I get to interact with people and I always learn. I don't think there's any training session that I've been on that I haven't learned anything from someone else. And also from each other. So if you want to share something about bringing safe products to market in the chat with the other people that are attending here, then please feel free to do that also. Just to let you know some current activities and what I've worked on, what in the past. So PAS 7050, which is a key document that we're talking about today, I was actually had the honor of being the technical author, which is kind of a minor role really, although I get to have my name in there, which I'm very proud of. But there's a whole steering group and an amazing team at the British Standards Institute, and also the sponsors of the PAS. These 3 PASs actually are the Office of Product Safety and Standards. And if I'm mentioning anything that you're unclear of, I know we've got different people here from different geographical representations, then please feel free to put it in the chat and I'll elaborate on any points that are not making sense. So a whole team effort is there to develop these PASs. So PAS 7050, which will be the key of what we're talking about today, but also 7100, which is key when reading 7050. You should have 7100 also. And then 7055 is about button and coin batteries, which is really key as well. So I had the honor of being the technical author of those PASs, and it's why we're here talking to you today about 7050. I've also worked on some EU projects, and I want to share some links actually in the chat for these because I think these are really helpful for anyone working in product safety. So please do let me know if this comes through okay, that the chat function's working. The SPEAK project is the Safe Non-Food Consumer Products in EU and China. And that is a free resource that is available to anybody who wants to look at the website. There are webinars that are on there, there's training programs, there's documentation, all explaining about key concepts such as, what's a declaration of conformity? What do I need to do to bring my electrical product to the market? So I think it's a really great resource that you can have that's available, and it's also translated into Chinese as well, which is really helpful if you're working with some colleagues that are based in China. So hopefully that worked. Everybody's a bit shy. I think nobody's actually said that. If someone can put in the chat that you've received it, yes, somebody's done it. Thank you so much. I don't feel alone anymore. Then also the CASP project is a really useful project, and hopefully there'll be some more information available online on that particular project, but you can search in your search engines, and that's a great project where market surveillance all work together to look at particular products or maybe cross-cutting issues, and another great initiative from the European Commission too. Then lastly, which we launched last week, which was amazing, was the Business Certificate of Competency in Product Safety. I realise I've missed the last 2 letters off there, but the BCCPS. And if you want to find out any more about the BCCPS, I'm going to put another link in the chat. So as you can see, there's going to be lots of information coming your way in this webinar. So that's a little bit about myself and what I do and where I work in product safety. And of course, I have the absolute honour of working with the amazing ICW team, who I met in person. Again, I've seen them quite a few times, but I met with them in Hong Kong a couple of weeks ago, which was great. So ICW basically support you with your compliance needs. And as we know, those of you that work in product safety, there is quite a lot of administration that is part of what we do. And it is important, it's vital. And I'm going to explain to you about how vital it is. But the challenge is when you're facing a stressful situation, which some of you may have been in, and you're looking for a specific document, maybe a test report that was on the specific batch that somebody is now questioning, whether it be market surveillance or a customer, or maybe one of your colleagues based in a different region, it is vital to be able to get that information really quickly. And that's what ICW support with. They support with the administration part of it. So filing all the documentation, the technical documentation, but also supporting with the compliance queries and the testing. So those of you that know working with test laboratories is a great thing to do. We need it for product safety, 100%. But sometimes it can be challenging depending on the test laboratory, depending on their expertise, depending on where they are around the world. So ICW really take that headache out of compliance. And they have an amazing team of experts, so over 60 experts that can support you with specific queries you have. I had a client recently that really needed help with chemical compliance, and it was amazing to be able to talk to the team and they respond really, really quickly and just let me know, what's the risk of these chemicals being in these products? Of course, it's a partnership, so you can't expect them to know everything if you don't share information with them. But ICW, the team, the support, the system, everything is amazing. So the information on their website, if you go to their website, here's just a screenshot of the website. There's also these webinars are on there. So we did previous webinars. We've got up and coming webinars on different topics, GPSR, cosmetics. And if you have any specific topics you'd like us to cover, then let us know and we can add those to our list of webinars that we'll be doing for you. So a huge thanks to the ICW team who are putting on this webinar for you about bringing safe products to market. So thank you for those that have put in the chat. I don't feel so alone. And hopefully I'm not going to feel so alone when I do this Menti, but sometimes people don't like doing Mentis. It's absolutely fine. All you need to do when you're completing a Menti is open your phone, just open the camera, just scan over the QR code, and hopefully it should bring you to the Menti where you can answer the question. Another way of joining is if you go to menti.com and you use the code that's there on the screen. And all we want to know is, have you ever used the PAS? So there's a simple yes or no question. And then I also want you to think about, what are your thoughts? Because this webinar is not for me, and I will put it on the next screen. Hopefully it will work and we can see what people are saying and a beautiful word cloud will appear. But what are your thoughts? What do you want to get out of this webinar now? We're here together for the next kind of 30 minutes. Is there a specific question you have? How can we help you? So we can try and address that and see if we have a slide on it, or if not, I can give you my opinion or my thoughts, or maybe we can come back to you. So we just want to know if you have any specific thoughts on the PAS or specific queries on the PAS. And hopefully, I'm just watching those come in now. Hopefully you can go to the next screen on your thoughts on the PAS. But it looks like the majority of you have actually never looked at the PAS or never used the PAS. So what I'm going to do while we're waiting for that Menti to come in, I am going to put in the chat where you can download PAS 7050. And you can download this for free, which again, a huge thanks to the Office of Product Safety and Standards for sponsoring the PAS and for allowing it to be freely available for you to download as a resource. So let me see. So at the moment, we still have it. The majority of you, there's only one of you that's ever used the PAS. So that's great. You're in the right place to learn more about it. Then I'm going to see if I can go to the next, if there's any specific. Oh, so there's either the Menti's not working or nobody's got any specific queries or thoughts on the PAS, or maybe perhaps I didn't go to the next slide quick enough, but it will be there. It's up. It's available for you to have a look at. I'll keep that up there for a second. And you can go to menti.com and use the code if you've got any specific, oh, somebody's put something in. Thank you so much. So a reference. Okay, that's what you think about when you think it is a really, really useful reference, definitely. But feel free to put your information in the Menti. The good thing about the Menti, it's anonymous. Of course, you can put a question in the chat, but I will see your name associated with it. But if you want to be anonymous, then you can put it in the Menti, and I'll leave that open to the side. So if you're thinking about something when I'm talking, you can still complete that there on the Menti. Okay, well, that's really useful to know. Really useful to know that actually, I'm assuming, I'm extrapolating there because there's a lot more than the people that just answered. Feel free to put it in the chat if you didn't want to use Menti. That quite a few of you have never even seen the PAS or referenced the PAS before. So that's great. We're going to cover that really briefly today. So the principles of product safety legislation are key, and I think sometimes are missed by businesses. So the fundamental principle of safety by design. And what I mean by this and why I'm saying this is I feel with some organizations, and I haven't worked with every organization in the world, there's a lot of emphasis on testing, which is great and is key and is amazing because we've got the ICW team here to help you with that, with your testing. But you have to ensure that your product is safe by design, and then the conformity assessment, which is the production control, is consistent. So you can get the product, you can design it, which hopefully you're looking at standards and looking at information. You go into production, you can then randomly test throughout production if you have the budget and the time, and hopefully you can. And then you're complying with your conformity assessment requirements under the CE marking or UKCA requirements that we have. And it's really, really important to ensure that that production control is in place and that the conformity assessment process are followed. And this is where documentation is key. If you don't have the documentation, how can you prove that all of the great work that you're doing within your organization has been done? And I guarantee you, there's a lot of you that do a lot of great work. It's just that we get busy with time and we forget to document it. And I know this because I run my own business and I'm terrible at documenting something sometimes. And we're just so busy getting the stuff done, we're forgetting about that process that we need to ensure. So conformity assessment must be documented in the technical documentation. It can also be called the technical file. And it is the primary obligation of the relevant economic operator to assemble technical documentation or ensure that it's been assembled. And I'm going to give another opinion on this, is that I feel that there can sometimes be a lot of finger pointing. When questioned by market surveillance or, customers maybe, or depends who's asking you, you might say, well, hang on a minute, that's not me. That's, the manufacturer or the distributor or the importer or whoever it is. It really is similar to life. When you have an argument with somebody, that's when you really get to find out what your relationship's worth. And I've had many arguments with many people, but many people I'm still friends with because of the way that you argued and the way you managed to sort it out. And you have to understand that it's a team effort. If you're putting products on the market, it doesn't matter who you are in the supply chain, you need to ensure that the product's safe. And the technical documentation is key in demonstrating that. So a key thing I learned when I did an expert witness course, one of the things that I really took out from that course is if it's not written down, it didn't happen. There is no point, and I don't want to be too negative about it, and hopefully you'll never be in a court situation, but if you're standing in court and you're saying, yeah, we did loads of work, we did all that testing, yeah, we did all that conformity assessment, the factory does loads of things, everything's amazing, but you don't have any documentation or evidence to prove that, it's like it didn't happen. So it's really, really important to ensure that your technical documentation or your file or whatever you want to call it is in a nice place, which ICW can definitely help and support you with it. And I'm not just saying that as a sales pitch for ICW, I'm saying it truly brings me joy when I go to a client and I open up their filing system and I can actually navigate and find what I need to find. Naming conventions is key. Let me just leave that there. So people have put a few things in the Menti about transparent, safety, advice, guidance, reference, direction, requirement. That's great. And considering it's anonymous and you could be as harsh as you like, I think that's really, really positive. So there's a lot of positive comments there about PAS 7050 or, specific questions you have. And hopefully if they're questions, because there's only one word coming in there, then hopefully I can give you the information about where the references is, the direction, etc. I'm going to move the Menti on actually to the next thing, because maybe you can put more if you have specific comments. Let me know if you have any specific questions. And of course, the chat's there if you need to do that. Okay, so if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So it's really important that you have the documentation. I just want to take a step back, because sometimes I think people get confused about this, or maybe it was just me that was confused about this when I started in product safety. So what's the difference between a regulation or a directive or a decision or an opinion or a recommendation, and do I need to care? There's one side of the argument where people will say, well, if it's not mandatory, don't worry about it. I strongly disagree with that, by the way, but everyone to their own. If there is legal obligations and there's legal requirements, you should really follow those. Of course you should, and you should follow any voluntary requirements that are out there, or all standards are basically voluntary, except a few examples. But it might be important, and I think this is more important if you're working for the legal team or you are a legal representative. That's when it becomes important, and of course about enforcing powers, etc., will be different under different pieces of legislation and what your obligations are. So the specifics are key depending on the situation that you're in. But I just want to mention, so a regulation is direct effect. A directive is an act addressed to EU countries and must be transposed in each national law. So just to give you one example, you have the General Product Safety Directive that we have at the moment, and that's enacted in each country. So in the UK here, we have the General Product Safety Regulation, which makes it a little bit confusing because the General Product Safety Directive in Europe is now moving towards a regulation. So now it's moving from a directive to a regulation, means that it's direct effect, and they're trying to avoid misinterpretation. But of course, that will always happen with all the member states that we have. A decision may have a direct effect when they refer to an EU country as an addressee. And an example of a decision, which I will talk about, is decision 2019-417. And I'm not just trying to show off with my numbers here, but that is a really important one on risk assessment. And if you're looking for the EU risk assessment methodology, you need to put in decision 2019-417 to your search engine to get that up. Really useful document, again, kind of like a guide. Then you have opinions and you have recommendations, which are really interesting. And then you've got standards, codes of practice and guidelines, which is where PAS 70 50 fits, 7100 fits as well. It's a code of practice. Whatever product you're selling, you should know, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, every regulation, directive, decision, opinion, standard or code of practice that's applicable to your product. And that might sound quite harsh and it might sound quite challenging, but I think it's better that you know, and you know whether it's relevant or not as well. And you can decide what you want to do with that information after. And again, the ICW team can help support with that. And your test laboratories can help support with that if you're struggling. And a lot of people do struggle, and we understand that and we know, and we're happy to help if you have any questions on what legislation is applicable to your product. So just to show you, and I'm just going to show off because I've got my paper copies here. So I do have a paper copy of the PAS. Got PAS 7050 and 7100. So 7050 is like the overarching bringing safe products to market. And part of that is we understand and we know that things will go wrong. The only safe product, as a colleague of mine said when I was with him a couple of weeks ago, is one that's not on the market. The minute you put that product on the market, there will be risks and safety issues associated with it. I can guarantee you that. It's about understanding what they are, how to mitigate them, but also when something goes wrong, PAS 7100 is talking about what do we do? How do we implement that? So 7050 is the overarching, and that's talking about a product safety management plan. And then 7100 talks about a product safety incident plan. Oh, someone's asked a really great question. So the decision is 2019-417 on risk assessment. And I thought I had, I thought I was good and had a link in here, but I didn't put a link in here because, let me put it in here. Because if I just put it, I can't spell decision now. It's not very good, is it? Okay. I'm going to put it there, and I haven't spelled decision correctly. Somebody's put it in. Amazing. Thank you. PAS, what does PAS stand for? Another great question. PAS stands for publicly available specification, which, if I'm honest, confused me because I was like, oh, publicly available, are they all free? No, they're not all free. And you can get different types of PASs. So you can get codes of practice or specifications. So 7100 and 7050 are actually what's known as a code of practice. You can see that here on the slide. And then 7055 that I worked on, and button and coin batteries, is a specification. So if you want to comply with 7055, you need to comply with the information that's in there, so that it's really specific. It's got specifications, there are options, but the code of practice tends to be more generic and general, and it fits really well for the purposes of what these PASs are. But great questions, and thank you so much for those questions. Really appreciate it. So yeah, Decision 2019-417 is the EU risk assessment methodology. And if you go to PAS 7100, there's actually an annex within there that breaks down the Decision 2019-417 and how to apply it, and gives you an example, which I think is really useful, mainly because I wrote it with a team. So you can let me know what you think about it. Okay, so both of these PASs are broken down into a part 1 and a part 2. Part 1 is for businesses and part 2 is for regulators. Part 1 is the biggest part of it, basically. It's got the scope, the normative references, and a normative reference is basically, what other document do I need when I'm looking at this document? So if you open PAS 7050, the normative reference will be PAS 7100, because you need to read them together. Terms, definitions, abbreviated terms, you might believe or you might not believe how much fun you can have over a definition. And I slightly mean that sarcastically, actually, because you can have so much discussion about what is the definition of something, but it is very, very interesting. And we have aligned those in 7100 and 7050, but it's key to be clear on what we're talking about when we mention certain things within the PAS. So that was important. Then the majority of this PAS is in section 4 of the PAS, which is a product safety management plan. So I want to develop a product safety management plan. Where do I start? What do I do? The first thing to mention is it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it whatever plan that you like. And I think it is important to use naming conventions or names of things that works for your organization. Call it whatever you like. All this PAS is trying to do is give you information and guidance on what would be expected to be seen within a product safety management plan. And some people go through it and they're like, actually, we've got a lot of this stuff already in place. And that's really great to do that. And I think it's very important if a market surveillance officer or anyone comes to question, you know, what do you do? And you can say, well, actually, we have a product safety management plan in place. This is what we do. And I think that's great. And to mention on that, that I do not believe that there's any document like this around in the world. This is actually the first of its kind with PAS 7050. So bringing safe products to market. 7100, there are certainly documents on recalls, etc. But there's nothing on that overarching product safety management plan. And you can use it anywhere. Just because it's developed with the British Standards Institute doesn't mean it can only be used in the UK. You can use it anywhere. Then there's specific sections in PAS 7050 on online marketplaces, repairers and refurbishers and distributors, because they're very pertinent topics. But in summary, they're very short sections and they basically say, have a product safety management plan in place. So part 2 is on regulators, which is important. And the key thing I want to pull out from this about regulators. So regulators, what we mean by regulators are your trading standards officers in the UK, or, you know, environmental health officers, whatever they may be in the jurisdiction that they're in and whatever they enforce, or throughout Europe, there'll be market surveillance officers. They should be there to support you, really, but it will depend on the jurisdiction. I 100% understand that, but I can certainly say for the UK, the trading standards officers are there to support you. And again, like any relationship, if you start off working with them before you have an issue, it makes it a lot smoother if an issue ever does come to fruition. But of course, it depends. Everyone is a bit case by case. But there's something here called the primary authority, which is what's mentioned here in the PAS as well. But it's worth having a little look at that section, even if you're not a regulator. Okay, so what should be in a product safety management plan? As you can probably tell, I could maybe do a PhD. I'm pushing it a little bit on this, but I could literally talk about this and go on about it for a very, very long time. But we only have a short amount of time in this session. So what I want to do is I will go through some slides very, very quickly, but there's some more information that you can find on the CTSI, so the Chartered Trading Standards Institute Business Companion website. And there's a longer webinar on there, if you're not sick of listening to me by this point, with myself and Mark Gardner, where we talk more about these PASs and what they are and how you can develop a PSMP, Product Safety Management Plan, or PSIP, product safety incident plan. But the key parts to a product safety management plan are commitment from management, which is key, training, clarity of supply chain responsibilities. You can see it on the slide, but let me give you some examples which I really want to share with you. Culture and training, what you're doing here today is phenomenal. You should document that. That's you developing in your own CPD, continuing professional development. And if your organization has allowed you to attend today, that's great. That talks a lot about what the organization supports. But there's a really great article here that was developed and written by a lady called Catherine Niven and her colleagues. And I highly recommend a read of this. And again, I'm going to put it in the chat. Got lots of information coming through on the chat. And if you're watching this back in a recording, please do contact ICW and we'll send you all of these links. But some of the key things that were mentioned here is about safety culture issues identified. So the participants, this is a survey, so this article is actually some research. They reached out to international experts on product safety. I was one of those, and asked their opinions on product safety. And what they found is that there's an apathy of some suppliers towards product safety. There's a deflection of responsibility. I'm talking about the finger pointing. It's not me, it's them. It's, who's responsible, not me. And, consumers may be blamed. Oh, well, that's just the consumer doing something ridiculous, which it can be. There's a misallocation of resources towards marketing or aesthetics over product safety. And there's this mindset that a standard is the end point. So, yeah, I've done my testing. I tested to the standard. That's it. I'm done. Everything's done. Rather than the minimum requirement, which is what we're talking about. So this is interesting to know. For me, it was great because I say this stuff, but I realize that it's not just me that feels that way. There's a lot of people in the industry of what we do that also feel that way. And they also identified a gap within that article about training. So hence we have the business certificate of competency in product safety. So it mentioned here there was a skills gap. And I really do feel for businesses because, well, trading standards here in the UK, they get great training. Of course, they have challenges, they're under-resourced, they have a huge remit, but they have a qualification to do what they do. When you're a business and you go and work within an organisation, it can be very lonely. You can be the only person and quite a thankless task. If everything's going along well, sales are well, everything's no customer complaints, that's great. But when something goes wrong as well, you're the first person that they're questioning or saying, why has this happened? And if you're on your own, that can be really isolating. So this training is not only about developing the skills to be a competent product safety professional, but also building a network where you can talk to other colleagues who are in the industry who are facing the same issues that you are, I guarantee it, but also with a great network of speakers and experts that are on this course as well. And of course, attending sessions like this ICW webinar or looking back on the recordings, I highly recommend that you do that. There's also, if anyone's working in product safety that's specific for children, but it's not really specific just for children, by the way, but it is 100% pertinent if you're dealing with childcare articles. But I would say other articles out there, we talk about tip overs, they talk about articles in the home. So it's not just children, not just children's products. What I mentioned is it's focused at children and injuries with children. But the products can be anything, right, in the home, such as dressers or stability of things. There's something called the Kids in Danger Toolkit, which is a free resource that's been developed by Kids in Danger. It takes about 4 hours to go through each part. There's a part 1 and part 2, and I highly recommend having a look at that. You can stop and start it anytime you like, but there's some really great training resources that are out there. Okay, so as you can see, we're just picking out some specific sections of PAS 7050 and how you can apply them. I'm just going to check the name of the decision, just checking that no other questions. I've addressed the questions, hopefully I have. I know I put a lot of links in there. So monitoring regulatory environment and market conditions. Again, ICW help their clients with this. They'll send information alerts coming out, there are things coming out about digital passport in EU or, things to look out for. They will send alerts and information out to you. There's a lot of information available online, and there are links within the PAS that suggest where you can go. Test labs are really useful as well. I find them really useful where they list things that are changing in that particular month or coming up. And of course, looking at recalls and alerts. So product recalls, as you can see an example there from the UK, the Product Safety Database. And injury and fatality, which is another favourite subject of mine, which I don't have time to talk about. But in the PAS, it has some links to some injury and fatality databases. One of the best is the US CPSC NICE database. And I'm just going to put that in the chat. I'm not going to put the link because I haven't CPSC NICE, because I want to clarify the spelling. It's not NICE as in nice, it's NEISS. Again, if you put that in your search engine, you'll come up with the injury database, which is a phenomenal product safety specific injury database. Risk assessment. So this is the decision that I mentioned earlier, decision 2019-417 here on the slide. So that's the EU methodology. And then there's something in the UK called the PRISM methodology, which is the product safety risk assessment methodology. And then just for information, there is something else called the nomograph. I tend to use a mix of decision 2019-417 and PRISM. And if you want to know more about the PRISM methodology, I believe there will be more coming from the Office of Product Safety and Standards on some webinars that you can join and learn more about the PRISM methodology. But they fundamentally work well together. They're not totally different. So just to mention risk assessment very, very quickly. 7100 was released before PRISM was released, hence why it focused on the EU methodology. And you can go to the annex where it breaks down the EU methodology, given an example, so you can get a bit of a guide on that as well. Okay. So the product safety incident plan, we spoke about the product safety management plan. So the product safety incident plan, there's some common themes in here. Commitment from management is key. Management have to commit and support developing the plan and understanding the challenges around it. And they're going to have to make some decisions on building the network that you might want to have. For example, you might want external legal counsel, which you might have depending on the jurisdictions that you're selling in, etc. So management commitment is vital. A traceability plan, monitoring plan, legal notification, risk assessment, corrective action decision, what you're going to do if an issue comes in, and it's never going to be the same. It's always going to be different. There will be similarities if you get the same queries coming in, but there's always going to be interesting ones coming in. It's why I love working in product safety. It's never the same. Training plan. So does everyone know what to do when an issue comes in? If your communications are not clear, or you say the wrong things to your customers, in-house or external, that can be really detrimental when you're facing a crisis, which is basically what corrective action can be. And then, of course, doing a review, which is really challenging for people. Anyone I know that's been involved in a product safety incident, they don't really want to ever talk about it again. But it's really important to review what's happened and then see what you can do better next time and see if you need to update your product safety incident plan. Okay, so that's the product safety incident plan really, really briefly. There are annexes in PAS 7050, and I shared the website earlier from the Chartered Trading Standards Institute, where you can go and download an editable version of these annexes. So they're mainly checklists. From A to E are checklists. A is for all businesses. So if you're a manufacturer, you should be using A and B. If you're an online marketplace, you should be using A and C. And what these checklists are for you to use for inspiration if you're looking at developing a product safety management plan. So you can edit it, you can change it. You don't have to use the same naming convention. It's just a document, what do we have in terms of training on product safety? What do we have in terms of corrective actions? How do we monitor the marketplace? This is what we do. It's just a place for you to really start thinking about your product safety management plan. And then Annex F and G are the annexes of these PASs and British standards in general, to be honest, are normally informative, which allows the author and the steering group to be a lot freer with the language that they use. Because within the PAS, you have to follow the rules, whether it be BS0 or PAS 0. Correctly so, when you're writing standards, you have to follow the rules. But Annex F and G are just more informative about what's technical documentation and documentation supporting compliance, and what does due diligence mean, which is vital in terms of product safety. So I highly recommend taking a look at those annexes. Okay, and that is the last slide. And somebody has a question. Okay, so what happens if you have products that are tested under some standards, and then an authority tells you that your products have failed the test because they have used different standards. Oh, wow. That sounds like an interesting situation to be in. And it's very difficult to comment without having the information. But the reality is that in product safety, and I would say in law in general, you will always have different interpretation. That's never going to go away. You know, even within the same testing laboratories for the same product, if it is the same product, you know, there can be interpretation issues, and sometimes you can have pass or fail. It could be, you know, is there manufacturing issues? Maybe one product that was tested is different to another. So there's so many different reasons that might be the case that it's very difficult for me to comment on that. But that does sound like a challenging situation. And if you want to contact us, the email is on the next slide. And if we can help you with that in any way, then do let us know. Is there any other questions? Think hopefully I put the link actually for the annexes. Due diligence is a very good question. Someone's asked what's due diligence, and if you go to the annex in the PAS, it explains more about that. But it's fundamentally, the way I'm going to explain it is, if you're standing in court, which you're not always going to be in court, and somebody says, what did you do? So what was the due diligence? What was the steps that you took to ensure that your product was safe? And there are different ways that you can look at it. The way that I would rather be, and if it's my clients, I would rather say, well, actually, we had a product safety management plan in place. We do testing for all of our products. This is the test laboratory that we work with. We do production control, and you're explaining what your due diligence process is. So all of the work that you do to ensure that your product is safe. So I hope that's explained what I mean by due diligence, but it's a legal term. And it means ensuring that you've done everything that you can do to get that product to market. There are some people, unfortunately, where it will come to that situation. They'll say, well, we didn't do anything because there is no standard for it. And that's not an excuse, in my opinion. Oh, somebody's put it in there. Let me read it. This is a much more elegant way of explaining it. Thank you so much for putting it in there. So due diligence is an investigation, audit, or review performed to confirm facts or details of a matter under consideration. In the financial world, due diligence requires an examination of financial records before entering into a proposed transaction with another party. That's brilliant. Yeah, that was much better than the way I explained it. But yes, that's what due diligence is, and highly recommend having a look at the annex of PAS 7100, which talks more about due diligence. But thank you for that. Any other questions? You've been a very interactive group, and I really appreciate it. And I think there's no questions or comments on the Menti, and nobody's got any questions in the chat. What will happen, I'm going to make sure I get this time, team at ICW, is there will be a questionnaire that comes out to you. We really, really appreciate it if you can complete that questionnaire. And of course, if you can let us know if you want to send us an email about any future webinars that you'd like, or any queries that you have regarding your compliance, we really are here to support you, and we will try our best to help you with any questions that you have. Thank you, and I hope you have a good rest of your day, and hopefully see you again soon. Thank you.